I think everyone can agree the key to Breath of the Wild's success was its willingness to change. 30 years of tradition is hard to break, and while most people are going to look to the big boy turnarounds like overworld and dungeon structures, for me it's a much smaller change how items and the player's abilities as a whole have been reshaped to fit the mechanics around them. Even before this newest entry illuminated a pretty tired old design blueprint, everyone seemed to acknowledge the 3D Zeldas had a problem of chucking items away after their dungeons. The main complaint you'd see could be summed up as, why is there nothing in the world to use this item on? But listen up kids, that's looking at the symptom, not the problem. The issue has always been with how items themselves were designed. Past Zeldas functioned on a system of keys and locks, slotting A into B. As a result, there was no flexibility. They'd only work in a vacuum and couldn't interact with each other without very specific scenarios being designed in mind. Look at the spinner from Twilight Princess, quite literally on rails. While it may make for some cool moments in its dungeon, without its lock, it's got no use. Even the most hardcore Beyblade fans won't find much use for it without a tractor hug, because it's only designed to be a unique dungeon gimmick. It's the same for a lot of Zelda's repository, the Dominion Rod and those statues, the whip and its respective switches, the mole mitts? Trying to use any of these items for something else is like putting square pegs in round holes, which isn't just restricting itself, but means that puzzles were often more about clocking what lock you're looking at, which they never really tried to hide. In Breath of the Wild, the world is the game, so items are made to fit the world rather than the other way around. Instead of the thought process being, how do we give this dungeon a unique gimmick, it's how do we make this item interact with the sandbox. For example, bodies of water are a common enough drowning or freezing hazard that a way to circumvent them is a genuinely useful tool. Cryosis is a real quality of life improvement because it fixes a problem that players may naturally come across in the overworld, rather than working backwards in creating obstacles to fit oddball mechanics. Even then, it's not too specific. Items are so flexible you may be able to use a different method, cutting down trees for a makeshift bridge or using the sailcloth to get there from a vantage point, because the mechanics here of the world, enemies and player all interact with each other. Wind is an environmental mechanic and it affects all sorts, from blowing spherical bombs, affecting your parachute momentum, sailing direction. There's a consideration now of the surrounding factors when you use these. They're not absolutist and rigid. You can even essentially create your own isolated wind with the Deku Leaf. The way it draws on a mechanic consistent in the environment means almost all of the side effects that come with regular wind apply here too. It's not an entirely segmented mechanic just used for a few menial tasks. There's this synergy between items because they take mechanics from the world. To take perhaps a more impressive example, fire is pretty constant throughout the game, used for not getting the chills, cooking up a brew, damaging enemies, damaging yourself, having a really boring barbecue without the barbecue sauce, and making an updraft through arson. You can create this condition in a number of ways, or have it created for you, and then the updraft affects your parachute, which in turn gives you a better vantage point on enemies to use melee or ranged attacks. There's an interplay between fire, environment, parachute, and attack that quite frankly has not been seen in a Zelda game before. I mean, in the past, most items that weren't just long-distance damage dealers were pretty cumbersome to use, but here the properties are just applied to pre-existing weapon types. The runes all operate on the same point-and-click system, and you can transition in and out of different items mid-use. Like, remember Skyward Sword's parachute? That wasn't even a mechanic. Couldn't change direction, couldn't go in and out of different items, you didn't even have to press B to whip it out, the game does it for you. It was a story concession first, and a gameplay addition second, in opposition to Breath of the Wild where everything gels together and most things aren't automatic. You even have to catch boomerangs on their return. That's so sick. I really am so glad Nintendo rethought this. Back in 2014, I genuinely feared they might just slap Twilight Princess in an open world and call it a day. Don't comment saying Twilight Princess has an open world. I mean, I guess it does. But Ninty took a good look at the system that was there and realized it just wouldn't work for a sandbox like this. I'm not sure the get item for dungeon, use item to beat dungeon structure necessarily had to go to accommodate this change, but it gave Aonuma and the lads a decent enough excuse to make the jump, and they stuck the landing. Thanks to this, puzzles can actually require some lateral thinking, world traversal is much more fluid, and combat can get a little creative. This has been a huge step up. I'm trying not to gush. It's so good. I played for over 13 hours straight one day. Send help! The big picture may be the most dramatic shift, but after the restrictive, isolated mechanics mechanics of games past, this flexibility feels so refreshing. By designing everything from the world, enemies, and perhaps most critically Link's moveset to collide and interact with one another, Nintendo has finally given Zelda items the utility they deserve. I do wish there were a few more of them, but I certainly use my arsenal here more than I have in a long time. It's like music, add instrumentation that fits the melody in place. Make your elements work in harmony as one piece rather than as separate chunks. If Skyward Sword is a collection of untuned harps, Breath of the Wild is a bangin' woodwind symphony, and it hits all the high notes.